Step away from the vehicle and keep your hands visible.
I understand that, but you have no legal reason to stop me. I am a law-abiding citizen.
Click. The sound of handcuffs locking echoed through the Phoenix night. A 38-year-old man, wrinkled black suit, standing next to a Dodge Durango. 9 minutes. Just 9 minutes. Nobody knew those 9 minutes would cost the city $3.3 million and force an entire police department to rebuild itself from the ground up. But to understand why an FBI agent ended up standing there, hands cuffed, blood trickling from his wrists, we need to go back 6 hours. Marcus Chen's name appeared in 52 federal court cases over 14 years. Not as a defendant. As the FBI agent who put 19 corrupt cops behind bars. Special Agent Marcus Chen, Phoenix Field Office, Violent Crimes and Public Corruption Unit, 14 years with the Bureau. Every single one of them spent investigating the people who were supposed to protect the public but decided to prey on them instead. Badge number 7412, Glock 19 in a biometric safe. A case clearance rate that made supervisors jealous and dirty cops nervous. When Internal Affairs couldn't crack a case, they called Chen. When the Department of Justice needed an expert witness, they called Chen. When defense attorneys saw his name on the witness list, they started negotiating plea deals. 52 times he sat in federal court and testified under oath. 52 times defense lawyers tried to break him on cross-examination. 52 times they failed. He had trained over 200 law enforcement officers across Arizona on something most of them thought they already knew: constitutional policing. How to do the job without violating the Fourth Amendment. How to make an arrest that would actually hold up in court. How to be a cop without being a criminal. The Phoenix Police Department sent their rookies to his seminars. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office made his training mandatory after a $4.8 million civil rights lawsuit. Even the DEA flew agents in from El Paso to hear him break down Terry v. Ohio and Pennsylvania versus Mims. Chen knew the law better than most lawyers. He could recite Supreme Court decisions from memory. He understood the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause the way a surgeon understands anatomy. And criminals, the ones wearing badges and the ones who didn't, feared him for exactly that reason. 19 officers had lost their careers because Marcus Chen knew how to build an airtight case. 6 went to federal prison. 13 took plea deals that ended their law enforcement careers permanently. All of them learned the same lesson. You can't intimidate someone who knows the law better than you do. But here's what the case files and court transcripts didn't show: Marcus Chen was a father first. His wife Sarah was a pediatrician at Phoenix Children's Hospital. Night shifts, weekend rotations, the kind of exhausting schedule that made other marriages crumble. But they made it work because they had a rule: family first always. 2 kids. Emma, 16, already talking about pre-med programs at Stanford and USC. Jake, 13, obsessed with basketball and convinced he'd play for the Suns someday. And every single night, no matter how late Chen worked, no matter how deep he was in case files or surveillance reports or preparing for testimony, he called home before 8:00 p.m. Not a text, a phone call. How was school? What did you have for dinner? Did you finish your homework? 10 minutes. Sometimes 15 if Emma wanted to vent about calculus or Jake needed help with a history essay. It was the one constant in a job where nothing else was constant, where cases dragged on for years, where witnesses disappeared, where guilty verdicts sometimes felt like the exception instead of the rule. That phone call was sacred. Sarah used to joke that Chen could be in the middle of interrogating a murder suspect, and he'd still excuse himself at 7:55 to call the kids. She wasn't entirely wrong. Here's the irony that makes what happened next almost unbearable. The cops who feared Marcus Chen, the ones who knew his reputation, who'd heard the stories about the agent who put their dirty colleagues in federal prison, they were terrified of him. They knew if Chen was investigating them, their career was over. But the cops who didn't know him, the ones who just saw a black man driving an expensive vehicle through North Scottsdale after dark, they had no idea who they were about to handcuff. And that night, September 23rd, Marcus Chen wasn't thinking about corrupt cops or court cases or constitutional law. He was thinking about getting home by 8:00 p.m. because Emma had her SAT prep test the next morning, and she always got anxious before big tests. And his job as her father was to be there on the phone telling her she was going to do great, just like he did every single night. That's all he wanted, to make it home, to make that call. 9 minutes later, his hands would be cuffed behind his back, and the phone call would never happen. 7:15 p.m. Interstate 10, eastbound. Exit 147 coming up in 3 miles. The digital clock on the dashboard glowed in the growing darkness. Marcus Chen had been awake for 16 hours straight. 16 hours analyzing 8,000 pages of financial records for a federal fraud case. Wire transfers totaling $14 million. Shell companies registered in Delaware, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands. Bank statements that didn't add up. Email chains that proved intent. The kind of case that required Chen to sit in a windowless conference room with 3 other agents, 2 forensic accountants, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. His eyes ached. His lower back screamed from hours in an uncomfortable chair. His shoulders were tight knots of tension. But the case was solid, airtight. The suspects had no idea the walls were closing in. On the passenger seat sat a locked aluminum briefcase, FBI property, stamped with law enforcement sensitive in red letters across the top. Inside, copies of the financial records, witness statements, and surveillance photos that would put 4 people in federal prison for the next decade. The kind of materials that federal law, Title 18 United States Code Section 641, explicitly prohibited unauthorized persons from accessing. The kind of documents that could destroy an investigation if they fell into the wrong hands. Chen's Dodge Durango, a 2023 model in midnight blue, moved smoothly in the right lane. Purchased 2 years ago with his own money. FBI salary. No loans, no favors, no borrowed anything. Registration in the glove compartment. Insurance card right next to it. Both current. Both in his name, Marcus James Chen. The vehicle was less than 2 years old. Every single light functioned perfectly. The tail lights had been inspected 3 months ago during routine maintenance. The windows were tinted, but well within Arizona's legal limit of 33% for front side windows. Cruise control locked at exactly 65 miles per hour. The posted speed limit, not 66, not 64, exactly 65. Chen drove the way he lived by the book. Always. His phone sat in the cup holder. 3 missed calls from Sarah. 2 texts from Emma. "Dad, when are you coming home?" "I'm nervous about the SAT prep test tomorrow." He'd call her back the moment he walked through the door. 7:58 p.m. Just like always. Chen's mind drifted to what Emma had said last week. "Dad, you know that pizza place near your office, the one with the white sauce and the spinach? Can we get that this weekend?" He made a mental note. Saturday night. Family pizza night. Emma's choice. The simple things. That's what mattered. The dashboard clock changed 7:43 p.m. 17 minutes. 17 minutes to get home, walk through the door, and hear Emma's voice on the phone. That's when Chen noticed it. In his rearview mirror, a patrol car. 4 car lengths back. Right lane. Same speed. Not unusual. Cops used I-10 all the time. But then a mile passed. Then another. The cruiser stayed exactly 4 car lengths back. Never closer, never farther, never changed lanes. Never passed him to continue wherever it was going. Chen had conducted enough surveillance operations in his career to recognize a tail when he saw one. His law enforcement instincts activated. He checked his speed 65 mph. Perfect. He checked his lane position centered between the lines. Perfect. He glanced at his mirror's taillights functioning. Perfect. Everything was legal. Everything was correct. There was no reason none for a traffic stop. And then without warning, without Chen's speed changing, without any violation occurring, the red and blue lights erupted behind him, flashing, bright, unmistakable. Chen's first reaction wasn't fear. It was confusion. What did I do wrong? The answer, absolutely nothing. But that wouldn't matter. Because in 9 minutes, Marcus Chen, a decorated FBI agent who had put 19 corrupt cops in prison, would be handcuffed on the side of a highway. And the 8:40 p.m. phone call to Emma would never happen. Chen signaled right, slowed gradually, pulled onto the wide shoulder near exit 147. Deliberately, carefully. Exactly as he had taught hundreds of civilians in FBI community outreach programs. He chose his spot with tactical precision directly under a bright streetlight immediately next to a Circle K gas station. The parking lot was well lit, 15 people visible, some pumping gas, others walking in and out of the convenience store. Witnesses, visibility, accountability. Chen shifted into park, turned off the engine completely, lowered his driver's side window all the way down, placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2 o'clock where they would be clearly visible. Standard procedure. Officer safety. De-escalation through compliance. Through his side mirror, Chen watched the officer exit the patrol car. The walk was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Not the confident stride of a professional conducting a routine traffic stop. This was aggressive. Confrontational. The officer's right hand rested on his holstered weapon. Not casually, deliberately, like he expected a threat. His jaw was set. His shoulders were tense. His eyes, even from a distance, radiated suspicion and hostility. Chen had conducted enough high-risk vehicle stops in his FBI career to recognize the body language. This officer was approaching Chen's vehicle the way you approach a suspected armed felon. Not a speeder, not someone with a broken taillight. A threat. The officer stopped 2 feet from Chen's door, shined his flashlight directly into Chen's face. Blinding, aggressive. No greeting. No, good evening. No, do you know why I stopped you? Just a command. Hard. Cold. License and registration. The name tag read, Morrison. Detective Kyle Morrison. Phoenix Police Department. 7 years on the force. Chen kept his voice calm, respectful, professional. Yes, officer. My registration is in the glove compartment. My license is in my wallet in my right front pocket. I'm going to reach for them now. Is that okay? Morrison said nothing, just kept the light in Chen's eyes. Chen moved slowly, deliberately telegraphing every motion, opened the glove compartment with his left hand, retrieved the registration, held it up so Morrison could see it clearly before handing it through the window. Then he reached carefully into his right front pocket, pulled out his wallet, opened it. The gold FBI badge gleamed under Morrison's flashlight. Unmistakable. The eagle. The scales of justice. The words, Federal Bureau of Investigation, engraved in raised letters. Next to it, visible through the transparent window in the credential case, Chen's official FBI identification card. Photo. Signature. Badge number 7412. This was the moment that should have changed everything. Any properly trained law enforcement officer in America recognizes federal credentials instantly. The protocol is clear, immediate de-escalation, professional courtesy. Verification, if there's any doubt. An apology for the inconvenience. Chen had been on both sides of this scenario dozens of times. He'd stopped off-duty cops during FBI operations. They'd shown their badges. He'd apologized, explained the situation, and sent them on their way. Professional respect. One officer to another. But Morrison's face didn't soften. His posture didn't relax. His hand didn't move away from his weapon. Instead, his eyes narrowed. His jaw clenched tighter. He stared at the badge, then at Chen, then back at the badge, like he was seeing something that didn't compute, something that couldn't possibly be real. A black man, expensive vehicle, FBI credentials. The math didn't work in Morrison's brain. He didn't ask, "What case are you working on, agent?" He didn't say, Let me verify this with dispatch. He didn't offer, sorry for the stop, have a good night. He said 3 words, hard, final. Step out, now. Chen felt his stomach drop. Officer, can you tell me the legal basis for ordering me out of the vehicle? Morrison's face flushed red. His voice rose. I said step out of the vehicle. Chen knew the law. Pennsylvania versus Mims. Officers have the authority to order drivers out during traffic stops for officer safety, but that authority has limits. It requires reasonable suspicion of danger or criminal activity. A federal agent, sitting calmly, hands visible, speaking respectfully, credentials displayed, 0 threat, 0 justification. Behind Morrison's cruiser, a second patrol car pulled up fast, lights flashing. An officer jumped out. The name tag read, Hernandez, Officer Luis Hernandez, 5 years with Phoenix PD. Hernandez immediately moved to the passenger side of Chen's Durango, pulled out a high-powered flashlight, started shining it through the windows, scanning the interior, searching. For what weapons, drugs, contraband, Chen had taught this exact scenario in his constitutional policing seminars. Always ask why. It's not disrespectful. It's your constitutional right. If an officer can't articulate reasonable suspicion, the stop is unlawful. His own words, his own training. Chen stepped out slowly, hands visible, no sudden movements. He stood there on the shoulder of Interstate 10. September evening, 7:49 p.m., still wearing his work clothes, charcoal suit pants, slightly wrinkled from 16 hours at the office, white dress shirt sleeves rolled up, navy tie loosened at the collar, black Oxfords dusty from the parking garage. He looked exactly like what he was, a federal agent who'd just finished a long day of work. But Morrison didn't see that. Morrison saw something else. Hands on the hood. Chen complied, placed his palms flat on the warm metal of the Durango, the position he'd seen hundreds of suspects assume during arrests. The position that signals you are not in control. You are being detained. You are powerless. Morrison moved behind him, started patting him down. Not professionally, roughly, hands pressing hard against Chen's ribs, checking his waistband with excessive force. Chen spoke clearly, loudly enough for the witnesses at the Circle K to hear. I have my FBI service weapon secured in a biometric safe in the rear cargo area. I am legally authorized to carry it under federal law. The safe can only be opened with my fingerprint. Morrison stopped, walked to the back of the Durango, opened the rear hatch. The biometric safe was bolted to the floor, clearly visible, clearly marked. Open it. Chen walked to the back, pressed his thumb against the scanner. The safe clicked open. Inside, a Glock 19, standard FBI issue, serial number registered to Marcus Chen, completely legal. Morrison reached in, lifted the weapon, held it up high like a trophy. Look at this. A weapon. Chen's voice stayed level, but inside alarm bells were screaming. That is my FBI-issued duty weapon. I am required by bureau policy to carry it. You are currently in possession of federal property. Morrison ignored him, walked the Glock back to his patrol car, tossed it onto the front seat, and that's when everything spiraled completely out of control. The dashboard clock read 7:52 p.m. 8 minutes had passed since the lights came on. The 8:00 p.m. phone call to Emma wasn't going to happen, and Morrison was about to make a mistake that would cost him everything. Hernandez was already inside Chen's vehicle, not standing beside it, not looking through the windows. Inside, leaning into the driver's seat, rifling through the center console, opening compartments, searching, without asking permission, without stating probable cause, without a warrant. Chen raised his voice, clear, firm, projecting so every witness with a phone could hear. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle. That vehicle contains federal law enforcement materials protected by statute. Title 18 United States Code Section 641 prohibits unauthorized access. Hernandez didn't stop. Didn't even look up. He moved to the passenger seat, saw the aluminum briefcase, grabbed it. Chen's heart rate spiked. "Officer, that briefcase contains classified FBI case files. Opening it without authorization is a federal crime." Hernandez popped the latches, opened the case, started flipping through documents, financial records, witness statements, surveillance photos, all marked law enforcement sensitive in red ink across the top. Morrison walked over, looked at the papers in Hernandez's hands, and then he did something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He grabbed one of the documents, a witness statement with redacted names and case numbers, and ripped it in half. E. The sound cut through the night air, sharp, unmistakable. Morrison held up the two torn pieces, looked Chen directly in the eyes, and threw them on the ground. Chen's voice was ice. "You just destroyed federal evidence. That is obstruction of justice under 18 U.S.C. 1519, a felony." Morrison's face was red. His breathing was heavy. His control was gone. "I don't care what paperwork you've got. You're under arrest." "For what crime?" "Suspicious activity." "Define suspicious activity under Arizona revised statutes." "We'll figure that out at the station." Morrison pulled out his handcuffs. Chen could feel his pulse pounding in his temples. 14 years as an FBI agent. Hundreds of arrests. Dozens of high-risk operations. He'd never felt this kind of helpless rage. "Officer Morrison, you are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. You have no probable cause for arrest. You are detaining a federal agent without legal justification. This is unlawful." Morrison grabbed Chen's left wrist, twisted it behind his back. Click. The handcuff ratcheted closed. Tight. Too tight. The metal bit into Chen's skin. "You are handcuffing an FBI special agent." Click. The second cuff locked onto his right wrist. Morrison leaned in close. His voice was low, venomous. "I'm handcuffing a criminal." The cuffs were deliberately over-tightened. Chen could feel his circulation cutting off, the metal edges digging into his wrists. Within seconds, his hands started tingling. He looked past Morrison's shoulder. The Circle K parking lot. 12 people, all watching. At least 8 phones held up. Recording, some horizontal for video, some vertical for Instagram stories. One woman, red-hair business suit, had her phone on a small tripod. Facebook Live. The red recording light was visible even from 30 feet away. Morrison saw them too. Saw the cameras. Saw the witnesses. His face flushed darker. But he didn't back down. Didn't soften. Instead, he seemed to double down, like he'd gone too far to retreat now without looking weak. He grabbed Chen's arm, harder than necessary, walked him toward the patrol car. Chen's mind was racing, processing, calculating. This is bad. This is very bad. But they're recording everything. Document the violation. Stay calm. Don't give them anything they can use against you. He spoke clearly, loud enough for the cameras. "I am Special Agent Marcus Chen, FBI badge number 7412. I am being unlawfully detained without probable cause. I have not committed any crime. I have not resisted. I am cooperating fully." Morrison shoved him toward the patrol car, opened the rear door. The back seat of a police cruiser is designed for punishment, not comfort. Hard, molded plastic. No cushioning. A metal cage separating it from the front. No door handles. No window controls. A cage for criminals. Morrison pushed Chen's head down roughly, not guiding, pushing, and shoved him into the seat. Chen's hands were cuffed behind his back. The position forced his shoulders into an unnatural angle. His knees jammed against the metal cage. The cuffs cut deeper into his wrists. He could feel warmth, wetness, blood. Through the window, he watched Hernandez continue searching his vehicle, opening compartments, checking under seats, looking for something, anything to justify this stop. The aluminum briefcase sat open on the hood. FBI documents scattered across the metal surface, some blowing in the evening breeze, classified materials, case files, witness statements, all of it exposed, all of it compromised. Chen closed his eyes, took a breath. Sarah's words came back to him. Something she'd said 2 years ago after he'd testified in a particularly brutal excessive force case. You spend your whole career teaching people their rights. Don't forget you have them too. He opened his eyes, looked at his reflection in the patrol car window. A black man in handcuffs, in the back of a police car, blood on his wrists. Every stereotype, every assumption, every racist justification for police violence all visible in one image. And 12 cameras were capturing every second of it. The dashboard clock in Morrison's cruiser glowed 8:04 p.m. Chen's phone was still in his Durango, in the cup holder, buzzing. Emma. Calling. Again. Dad, where are you? I'm nervous about tomorrow. Can we talk? He couldn't answer, couldn't reach his phone, couldn't make the call he'd never missed in 16 years. Morrison and Hernandez stood outside the vehicle, talking. Their body language was tense, animated. Morrison kept gesturing toward Chen. Hernandez kept shaking his head. They were realizing something, realizing they'd made a mistake. A big one. 40 minutes later, a third patrol car arrived, slowly. No lights, no sirens. The door opened. A sergeant stepped out, and everything was about to change. The third patrol car arrived without fanfare. No lights, no sirens. Just a quiet roll onto the shoulder 40 minutes after Chen had been cuffed. Sergeant David Cole, 24 years with Phoenix PD. The kind of cop who'd seen enough bad stops to recognize one instantly. He stepped out slowly, looked at the scene. Morrison and Hernandez standing by Chen's Durango. Chen visible through the rear window of Morrison's cruiser, hands cuffed behind his back. A dozen civilians in the Circle K parking lot, phones still out, still recording. Cole walked to Chen's vehicle first. Checked the tail lights. Had Hernandez turn on the headlights, the turn signals, the brake lights. Every single light functioned perfectly. Then he walked to Morrison's patrol car, leaned in through the driver's window, started reviewing the dash cam footage. Chen watched through the rear window as Cole's face changed. Confusion, then concern, then something that looked like barely controlled anger. Cole rewound the footage, watched it again. 3 times, no traffic violation. No erratic driving, no probable cause, just a black man driving a nice vehicle. That was it. That was the entire justification. Cole got out of the cruiser, gestured sharply at Morrison. Over here. Now. They walked 20 feet away from the vehicles, out of Chen's earshot but not out of sight. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. Chen couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. Cole's voice started low, professional, controlled. Then it rose. Gestures became sharper, more forceful. Morrison's posture changed from defensive to deflated. His shoulders dropped, his head lowered. Whatever Cole was saying, it wasn't good. Finally, Cole walked back to Morrison's cruiser, opened the rear door. You're free to go. There was a misunderstanding. Chen didn't move immediately. He looked directly at Cole, held his gaze, then he turned around, showed his wrists. Blood had soaked through where the cuffs had cut into his skin. Dark red stains on the metal, deeper red where the skin had broken. Misunderstanding. That's an interesting word choice, Sergeant. Cole's face tightened, but he didn't apologize, didn't explain, just unlocked the cuffs and stepped back. You're free to go. Chen stepped out of the cruiser. His shoulders ached, his wrists throbbed, his back screamed from 40 minutes in that position. He walked to his Durango. The aluminum briefcase sat open on the hood. Documents scattered across the metal surface. Some had blown off onto the ground. classified FBI materials, case files, lying in the dirt on the side of Interstate 10. The interior of his vehicle looked like it had been ransacked. Center console open, glove compartment hanging loose, seats moved, personal items scattered. His phone showed 6 missed calls from Emma, 3 from Sarah, 11 texts. The dashboard clock read 8:47 p.m. He'd missed the call, for the first time in 16 years. Chen looked at Cole. His voice was quiet, controlled, but every word carried weight. 14 years as an FBI agent, never missed a call to my daughter, not once, not when I was undercover, not when I was testifying in federal court, not when I was on surveillance for 72 hours straight. He held up his bloodied wrists. Your officers destroyed that tonight in 9 minutes. Cole said nothing. He couldn't. What was there to say? Chen began gathering his scattered documents. Carefully, methodically, like he was processing a crime scene, because that's exactly what this was. Morrison and Hernandez stood near their patrol cars, not speaking, not moving, both of them staring at the ground. They knew. They'd just made a career-ending mistake. But they didn't know yet how bad it was going to get. Because 12 people at the Circle K had recorded everything. And by morning, the entire country would see what Phoenix PD had done to a decorated federal agent. Chen loaded the last of his documents into the briefcase, closed it, locked it. He started his Durango. The engine turned over smoothly. Everything mechanical still worked perfectly. It was everything else that was broken. As he pulled back onto Interstate 10, Chen looked in his rearview mirror one last time. Cole, Morrison, Hernandez, all still standing there, watching him leave. They looked like men who'd just realized they'd walked into a minefield, and the first explosion was about to go off. Rachel Diaz woke up at 6:00 a.m. Wednesday morning to 147 missed notifications. Her phone was overheating from the constant stream of alerts. Messages, shares, comments. Her Facebook live stream from the night before the one she'd filmed outside Circle K while getting gas had been viewed 4.2 million times. 4.2 million. In less than 12 hours. She sat up in bed, opened Facebook. The comments were pouring in faster than she could read them. This is exactly why we need police reform. An FBI agent, are you kidding me? I'm a retired cop and this makes me sick. Share this everywhere. People need to see this. Rachel wasn't the only one who'd recorded it. By 7:00 a.m., 12 separate videos from different angles had been uploaded to Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Some were shaky smartphone footage. Others were steady, well-framed shots from people who knew how to film. Together, they created a comprehensive record of the entire encounter, from multiple perspectives, with clear audio. Undeniable. By 8:30 a.m., Phoenix FBI was trending #1 nationwide on Twitter, over 300,000 tweets, and climbing. By 10:30 a.m., every major news network had made it their lead story. CNN showed the footage of Morrison ripping the FBI document in half, played it on loop, analyzed it with a panel of legal experts who all agreed this was indefensible. Fox News ran a segment titled, "When Cops Go Too Far." Even their typically pro-law enforcement hosts were struggling to defend this one. MSNBC interviewed former FBI agents who expressed shock and outrage that one of their own had been treated this way. The New York Times homepage featured a still image from one of the videos Chen hands cuffed being shoved into the patrol car. The headline, "FBI agent detained in Arizona racial profiling, caught on camera." At 11:00 a.m., the FBI Phoenix field office held an emergency meeting. Every supervisory agent was called in. The special agent in charge personally briefed FBI Director Christopher Wray via secure video call. Wray's message was clear. We protect our people. Handle it. At 2:00 p.m., Phoenix Police Chief Patrick Sullivan stood at a podium in front of a packed room of reporters. He looked exhausted. His prepared statement was 3 paragraphs long. The behavior displayed in last night's incident does not reflect the values of the Phoenix Police Department. We are launching an immediate and thorough investigation. Officers Morrison and Hernandez have been placed on paid administrative leave pending the outcome of that investigation. The questions from reporters were brutal. Why was an FBI agent handcuffed without probable cause? Is this standard procedure for your department? How many other people has Officer Morrison done this to? Sullivan had no good answers. The numbers told the story better than any press conference could. 24 hours, 18 million views across all platforms. 48 hours, 35 million views. 1 week, 52 million views. More people watched Marcus Chen get illegally detained than watched the Super Bowl halftime show. The comments section became a digital town hall for police accountability. 847 retired law enforcement officers, cops, sheriffs, federal agents posted variations of the same message. I wore the badge for 30 years. This makes me ashamed of the profession. Current officers were more careful, but some spoke anonymously to reporters. We all know guys like Morrison. Everybody knows. And nobody does anything about it until something like this happens. Legal analysts on cable news broke down the constitutional violations one by one. Fourth Amendment, 14th Amendment, federal obstruction statutes. The list was long. One Georgetown law professor put it simply, "This is a textbook example of what not to do. If I wanted to teach law students about illegal stops, I'd show them this video." But perhaps the most damaging commentary came from civilians, regular people, who saw the videos and recognized something they'd experienced themselves. Thousands of comments from black drivers. This happened to me in 2019. No video, no justice. I've been pulled over 14 times in 3 years, never ticketed, always suspicious. At least he's an FBI agent. I'm just a teacher. Who's going to believe me? The message was clear. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern. And for once, it had been captured on camera with a victim who had the credentials, the resources, and the legal knowledge to fight back. By the end of the week, #Phoenix FBI had generated over 2.3 million posts. The videos had been shared on every continent. International news organizations picked it up. The UN Human Rights Council issued a statement expressing concern. Morrison and Hernandez were suspended, but that wasn't enough. Not anymore. Because Marcus Chen wasn't interested in press conferences or paid leave or internal investigations that historically led nowhere. Chen was interested in one thing: accountability. And he knew exactly where to get it. Federal court. Gloria Martinez had spent 22 years suing police departments. She'd won $47 million in settlements, forced 3 departments into federal consent decrees, gotten 18 officers fired and 4 criminally prosecuted. When Marcus Chen called her office, her paralegal said there was a 2-month wait list. Chen said 6 words: FBI agent, handcuffed, video evidence, Phoenix. Martinez cleared her schedule. 90 days after the incident, the minimum legal waiting period, Martinez filed a 47-page complaint in U.S. District Court for the District of Arizona. Defendants: Morrison, Hernandez, Cole, City of Phoenix. Charges: 4th Amendment violations, 14th Amendment violations, federal obstruction, assault under color of law, municipal liability for failure to train and supervise. Every claim backed by case law. Every violation documented with timestamps from 12 different camera angles. And then came discovery. Discovery is where police departments are forced to reveal what they've been hiding. Personnel files, internal emails, complaint records, all of it, under oath, with criminal penalties for concealment. What Martinez found in Morrison's file should have ended his career years ago. 22 formal citizen complaints over 7 years. 19 from Black or Latino drivers. 0 disciplinary actions. Every complaint told the same story: pretextual stops. No legitimate violation. Aggressive behavior. unwarranted searches, false accusations invented after the fact to justify the unjustifiable. Morrison had been verbally counseled twice. No documentation, no retraining, no consequences. Just stern talks behind closed doors that changed nothing. But the emails were worse. 3 years before Chen's stop, Lieutenant James Ross sent an internal memo to the command staff. Subject line, Morrison, pattern concerns. The body of the email was clinical, professional, damning. Detective Morrison's traffic stop data shows concerning trends. Over 18 months, 247 stops, 203 involving minority drivers, 82.2%. District demographics, 52% white, 31% Latino, 17% black. Recommend monitoring and possible retraining on implicit bias and constitutional standards. Chief Sullivan's response came 3 hours later. Continue monitoring. Document additional complaints. Insufficient evidence for formal action at this time. Translation. We see the problem. We're choosing not to fix it. Because taking action would mean admitting the department had knowingly allowed a problem officer to keep patrolling, keep stopping people, keep violating rights, easier to wait. Hope nothing major happened. Hope he'd retire before the inevitable lawsuit. They'd gambled, and Marcus Chen was the house calling in the debt. Hernandez's file was thinner but equally damning. 14 complaints in 5 years, 12 from people of color, 0 discipline. Then Martinez brought in the numbers. She hired Dr. Robert Chen, no relation a statistics professor from Arizona State University who specialized in analyzing police data for discrimination patterns. Dr. Chen spent 6 weeks analyzing Morrison's stop records. Traffic citations, search authorizations, arrest reports. His findings were presented in a 34-page expert report that destroyed any claim of random enforcement. Morrison's 3-year record, 312 traffic stops total, 267 involved black or Latino drivers, 85.6%, 45 involved white drivers, 14.4%. Morrison's patrol district was 52% white. If stops were based purely on traffic violations, not race, you'd expect roughly 52% of his stops to involve white drivers. Instead, white drivers made up only 14.4% of his stops. Black drivers, 17% of the district population, made up 48% of his stops. The search data was even more damning. 198 vehicle searches conducted. Contraband found in 23 cases. Success rate, 11.6%. When police have actual probable cause, not just suspicion based on skin color, contraband recovery rates typically exceed 40%. Morrison was conducting fishing expeditions, hoping to get lucky, violating the Fourth Amendment 177 times without consequence. Dr. Chen's conclusion was mathematical and merciless. The probability that this racial disparity occurred by random chance is approximately 1 in 250,000. These patterns are statistically consistent with racial profiling. 6 months after the lawsuit was filed, Gloria Martinez deposed Morrison under oath. The conference room was small, windowless. A court reporter sat in the corner, fingers poised over the stenography machine. Morrison's union-provided attorney sat beside him, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Martinez started gently, almost conversational. Detective Morrison, why did you initiate the traffic stop of Agent Chen's vehicle on September 23rd? Morrison straightened, confident. The taillight was malfunctioning. Which taillight? The left one. You observed this malfunction directly? Yes. Martinez slid a folder across the table. I'm showing you Exhibit 14, video footage from 4 angles, both taillights functioning perfectly. Can you explain the discrepancy? Morrison's confidence cracked. I must have been mistaken. Mistaken? So there was no taillight malfunction? No. Then why did you stop him? Morrison shifted. He was speeding. Your dash cam shows his vehicle traveling at 65 miles per hour. The speed limit is 65. How was he speeding? He might have been speeding earlier. Might have been. Did you observe him speeding? Not specifically. Not specifically. Does that mean no? Pause. Long. Uncomfortable. It means I had reasonable suspicion of suspicious activity. What activity was suspicious? The vehicle, the area, the time of night. A legally registered Dodge Durango, driven properly, in a public area, at 7:45 p.m. What about that was suspicious? Morrison's attorney interjected. Don't answer that. But the silence said everything. Martinez leaned back. Detective Morrison, yes or no? Did you stop Agent Chen because he was a black man driving an expensive vehicle? Objection inflammatory. I'll rephrase. What objective articulable facts gave you reasonable suspicion to initiate that stop? Morrison stared at the table, said nothing, because there were no facts, just bias, just assumptions, just a pattern that had been allowed to continue for 7 years, because the system protected itself instead of the people it was supposed to serve. The deposition transcript ran 214 pages. Every page was another nail in Morrison's career coffin. The lesson was brutal and clear. Systems don't fix themselves. They protect themselves. They shield bad actors until outside force lawsuits. Media exposure, federal intervention compels change. Marcus Chen was that outside force. 8 months after the incident, the city of Phoenix requested a settlement conference. Not because they felt guilt, not because they wanted to do the right thing, because they knew they were going to lose. Badly, publicly, expensively. And Gloria Martinez was about to make them pay for every single violation. May 2024. 15 months after the night everything changed. The settlement conference room sat on the 8th floor of the federal courthouse. Large windows, afternoon sun cutting sharp angles across the table. On one side, Gloria Martinez, Marcus Chen, 2 FBI attorneys who'd flown in from D.C., on the other, Phoenix City attorney, 3 defense lawyers, an insurance adjuster taking notes, Chief Sullivan, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 15 months. The negotiation started at 9:00 a.m. By 6:47 p.m., both sides signed. $3.3 million. Third largest police misconduct settlement in Arizona history. Gloria Martinez didn't smile when they wrote the number, because the money was never the point. She flipped to page 12 of the consent decree. 63 pages total, court-ordered, binding for 5 years, overseen by a federal monitor. This was the point. Bang. The decree gave Phoenix PD 90 days to install software that would track every traffic stop in the city. Every officer, every driver, every outcome. The AI would flag patterns automatically. If any cop's stops showed racial disparities exceeding 15% of district demographics 2 quarters in a row, that officer came off patrol immediately. 40 hours of retraining, implicit bias, constitutional law, the whole thing. 3 quarters above the threshold desk job. Or termination. No appeals. No second chances. The data would go live on the city's website every quarter, publicly searchable. Anyone could type in an officer's name and see their stop record. 85% minority stops in a 52% white district. The algorithm didn't care about excuses. It just counted. Chen watched the city attorney's face as Martinez explained this part. The man looked like he'd swallowed glass, because this wasn't a suggestion. This was federal court order. Violation meant contempt charges. Meant the Justice Department could federalize the entire department. Phoenix PD would comply. Or Phoenix PD would cease to exist. The Civilian Review Board got real power. 9 members. 5 regular citizens, a high school teacher, a pediatrician, a small business owner, a retired postal worker, a community organizer. 2 civil rights attorneys, 2 former cops who'd spent their post-retirement years advocating for police accountability. They could launch investigations, subpoena witnesses, review body camera footage the department would normally lock away forever, and they could recommend discipline, written warning all the way up to termination. If the chief rejected a recommendation, he had to write a public explanation, 5,000 words minimum, posted on the city website, subject to city council review. No more closed-door dismissals. No more, we investigated ourselves and found nothing wrong. Every decision was public now. Transparent, accountable. Body cameras became non-negotiable. 100% of patrol officers, no exceptions. Camera activates before approaching any vehicle. Stays on until the stop concludes and the driver leaves. First, forgotten activation, 7-day suspension without pay. Second time, 30 days. Third time, fired. The footage would be stored by an independent third party. Not Phoenix PD, not the police union. An outside contractor with no loyalty to anyone. The Civilian Review Board could access any footage, anytime. Officers couldn't control the narrative anymore. The cameras would tell the truth. Every time. Training doubled. 60 hours per year. Mandatory. 24 hours on implicit bias. Not watching a PowerPoint. Actual scenario training. Professional actors of different races playing civilians. Officers had to navigate 40 situations, traffic stops, wellness checks, warrant service, and demonstrate constitutional decision-making. Fail 1 scenario, retake the training. Fail 3, fitness for duty evaluation. Possible reassignment or termination. 20 hours on de-escalation. How to resolve conflict without force. How to recognize when your own emotions are escalating things. 16 hours on constitutional law. Fourth Amendment updates. Recent Supreme Court decisions. What reasonable suspicion actually means under current case law. All materials reviewed annually by civil rights attorneys. No more officers graduating the academy and then coasting for 20 years on outdated training. The law changes. Training had to change with it. The individual consequences came swift and permanent. Morrison was terminated immediately. His police certification revoked by the state board. He could never work as a cop again. Not in Arizona. Not anywhere. His union appealed through arbitration. The arbitrator's decision was 11 pages long. The conclusion fit in one sentence. Officer Morrison's conduct was indefensible. Termination upheld. Hernandez was fired too. But unlike Morrison, Hernandez did something rare. He apologized, publicly, on television. He sat across from Chen in a local news studio 3 months after the settlement. Looked directly at him. I was wrong. I should have stopped it. I didn't. That's on me. I'm sorry. Chen accepted the apology, but Hernandez's law enforcement career was still over. Sergeant Cole got demoted to patrol officer, lost his supervisory pay $18,000 a year, reassigned to records management. He'd spend the rest of his career filing paperwork in a windowless office. His failure wasn't active misconduct, it was passive enabling. He'd seen Morrison's complaint pattern. He'd done nothing. That was enough. Chief Sullivan resigned 3 months after the settlement, under pressure from the mayor, under investigation by the FBI's Civil Rights Division. He took his pension and disappeared. 6 months after the settlement, Marcus Chen was promoted. Supervisory Special Agent, FBI Civil Rights Division, Washington, D.C. His new job, investigate police misconduct nationwide. Over 2 years, he worked 47 cases. Police shootings, unlawful stops, excessive force, pattern and practice investigations that resulted in consent decrees forcing systemic change in departments from Baltimore to Albuquerque. He also became one of the FBI's most requested trainers. 600 officers across 12 states attended his seminars on constitutional policing. The title never changed, How Not to Be Morrison. It was always standing room only. Chen donated $2.8 million of his settlement. Everything except legal fees and medical expenses. NOACP Legal Defense Fund, ACLU Criminal Law Reform Project, and a scholarship fund for students of color pursuing law degrees. He named the scholarship after Emma and Jake, a reminder of what he'd been trying to get home to that night.
Tapcar.
Every year on September 23rd, the anniversary, Chen called his kids, no matter where he was, no matter what case he was working. He told them the same thing every time. Never let anyone convince you that silence is safer than speaking up. Your rights matter. Your voice matters. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to accept injustice. Emma was 19 now, freshman at Stanford, pre-med like her mom. She told a reporter last year, Dad didn't make it home for the 8 p.m. call that night. But what he did instead answered questions for millions of people. Can you fight back? Can you win? Can the system change? The answer is yes, if you refuse to stay silent. 2 years after the consent decree took effect, the data told the story. Traffic stops of black drivers in Phoenix down 44%. Traffic stops of white drivers up 23%. Total stops decreased overall because officers couldn't justify pretextual stops anymore. But the demographic breakdown started matching population percentages. Vehicle searches down 51%. But contraband recovery rate up from 12% to 34%. Fewer searches. But when they happened, they were based on actual probable cause, and they found evidence. Complaints alleging racial bias down 68%. Community trust surveys showed transformation. Black residents who agreed Phoenix police treat people fairly, 17% to 61%. Latino residents, 22% to 59%. The reforms worked. Not perfectly, not completely, but measurably, undeniably. Gloria Martinez stood at a podium during the settlement press conference. A reporter asked, "Is $3.3 million enough?" Martinez's answer came immediately. Money is never enough. You can't compensate someone for being handcuffed on the highway because of their skin color. She paused. But the consent decree, that's the victory. Because it doesn't just help one victim. It protects thousands of future drivers who will never know their rights were about to be violated because the system finally changed. She looked directly into the camera. That's accountability. That's justice. And Morrison. He works security now. Night shift at a grocery store in Mesa, checking receipts, watching cameras, no badge, no gun, no authority. He can't handcuff anyone ever again. 9 minutes. That's all it took to destroy a 7-year career and force an entire city to change. September 23rd, 7:43 p.m. to 8:52 p.m. 9 minutes. $3.3 million divided by 9 minutes equals 366 sounds 666 per minute. Marcus Chen spent in handcuffs. 52 million people watched the video, more than the entire population of Spain. 600 police officers trained by Chen over 2 years, all of them learning from Morrison's mistakes. Morrison's 7 years on the force, 9 minutes of mistakes, fired permanently. Emma Chen is 19 now. She said it best. Dad didn't make the 8 p.m. call that night, but what he did instead answered the question for millions of people. Yes, you can fight back. Yes, you can win. Yes, the system can change. If you believe no one should be stopped, searched, or handcuffed because of their skin color, subscribe. Tomorrow, a federal judge gets pulled over by highway patrol. The officer tries to arrest her. He has no idea she's heading to a judicial ethics conference, with her court recorder running in her purse. You won't want to miss it.